Hey, financial coach, get ready for the brand new mastermind experience starting on Tuesday, September 10th. Over 2 weeks, you'll have the chance to experience our official financial coach mastermind firsthand. If you've ever been curious about whether a mastermind is the missing piece that can help you make the time you're spending on your business even more impactful, now is the time to find out. Connect with other dedicated financial coaches, learn from their experiences, and discover what's working and what's not. Don't miss out on this opportunity to get a powerful peek into the mastermind and decide if it's exactly what you need to navigate your business into next year. Go to financialcoachacademy.com/mastermind for more information.
I'm ahead of the game.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Dickey, the CEO of the Financial Coach Academy and my financial coaching business, Fiscal Fitness Phoenix. My coaching journey began more than a decade ago with me helping people for free from my dining room table. What was once a little business of mine has grown into a 7-figure company that employs a team of people. My goal is simple: to help you fall more and more in love with financial coaching. I believe financial coaching is the most rewarding way to make a living. If you are an aspiring financial coach or have been coaching for years, I'm here to help you create a business you love that gets your clients massive results. Let's get to it.
Hello, Coach. Welcome back to another episode of the Financial Coach Academy. It is Coach Jill here again, subbing in for Kelsey Dickey while she is on her summer sabbatical. Send some wonderful wishes to Kelsey while she is living her best life out on the lake. And I am super excited to be here with you again for another episode. If you didn't catch last week's episode, go back and give it a listen. I was talking with you about how to overcome objections on pricing, and I'm going to be here with you for the next couple of weeks. So today we're going to be talking about how to engage with people in your DMs. You know, those awkward conversations that can sometimes fizzle out on social media. We're going to talk about how to overcome that and get those conversations moved into the real world. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to Sasha Roach. She left us a comment on YouTube and she says, I absolutely loved this episode. It is exactly what I needed to start taking action in my business again. Thank you so much for the comment, Sasha. We are so glad to know that the episode inspired you into action. In case you're wondering, she was referring to episode 68, so you can go back and check that one out if you missed it. It is how to stop spinning your wheels. So for any of you that are feeling overwhelmed or stalled out, that is a great episode to go and check out. And it got Sasha right back into action, which is exactly what we want, is to inspire you guys to be moving forward and taking action in your business. All right, so for today's topic, we're talking all about social media conversations in DMs. And I think that when it comes to our social media marketing, for a lot of us, we probably have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with it, right? It is so wonderful how it can connect us to people all over the world, people that we never would have had the opportunity to meet if not for social media. In fact, that's probably how you are connected to this podcast and maybe to the Financial Coach Academy, is that you found us online somewhere, and that is how we got connected. So I think that is really so cool. I love that about it. I love how it allows us to make connections, develop relationships, build community, find support from people with similar interests, goals, desires. And in that way, social media is so wonderful, and it can be really so helpful in our business to connect us with people who want and need our help. But the opposite side of that is that it can also feel so impersonal, right? We are connected, and yet we're not connected at all. We might know about each other's social media persona, but we often feel like we don't really deeply know one another. We can communicate with one another, but never actually feel fully heard or understood because there's so much missing when we aren't able to have a real time conversation. So in a lot of those conversations online, we might, miss the nuance. We aren't able to get the details that we can in a real world conversation. When we're talking face to face, I can hear and feel your emotions, right? I know what you're thinking, what you're feeling because of that real-time interaction. Or we can ask more questions and get the raw and unedited answers. Conversation is truly so beautiful, and I do believe that it's the best way to build trust and create that real connection with another person. And in this world of social media, so much of that is lost, right? We get bits and pieces of things, but it's really rare that the same caliber of conversation can happen via DMs that would happen in a face-to-face or voice-to-voice conversation. I want you to think for a minute about text messages or DMs maybe that you've received in the past that you've had to take a minute to double check it, right? You have to go back and sort of read it and then reread it, or you think to yourself did I read that right? Or are they mad at me? You have that friend that sends you everything in caps locks, they're yelling at you. You might have those messages that you get and you think, what exactly are they trying to tell me? Or what aren't they telling me here? And there's just so many things that are lost in the DM because it takes time to curate a complete or well thought out response. And most people are going to shorthand it a bit, right? And most of us don't want to write or read a novel in our DMs. It's really challenging to write everything that we would like to say to someone. At least that is very true for me. I know that I never articulate nearly as well. If I have to text it out or send it in a DM, I would just rather hop on the phone or send a voice message or something. So that usually is the better way to communicate, I think, for most people. So you get those text messages that you maybe have to reread or rethink or try to interpret. And then I want you to think about how you might respond to things, right? When you go to respond to it, how long does it take you to write or rewrite a message to make sure it sounds just right? Right? This maybe isn't so true when you're responding to your kids or your spouse, but if you're responding to a prospect who has asked you a question, how long does that response take you to make sure you're saying just the right thing? Or how often do you second guess yourself, or you wonder if maybe you said something wrong if you don't get a response right away? And what drama goes through your mind when you're left hanging, waiting to see what they're going to say? Right? The conversation gaps and lags can really drain what may have started out being a really great conversation. And if we as coaches don't know how to convert those online conversations into real world conversations, we might miss out on the opportunity to really connect with someone who wants and needs our help. We might take what was a wonderful opportunity to connect with an ideal client, and if we aren't careful, we could wind up stuck in a conversation that is going nowhere, or find ourselves ghosted and feeling awkward and confused about what went wrong. So when you're communicating with someone via DMs, there definitely are some things that you should do and some things you should not do in order to have some more effective communication. And that is what I want to go over today. All right, so let's start with a few things that you don't want to do when you're talking to someone in your DMs. I have 4 of them for you. So if you're taking notes, this is where you're going to want to start to write things down. So the first thing that you do not want to do when you are talking to someone via DMs is to jump immediately into inviting them onto a phone call or immediately to trying to sell them your coaching or your program, right? So I want to urge you to get to know them a little first, right? We want you to swoon them, date them a little bit, So don't just pounce on them. That's going to be an immediate turn off. I get messages all the time on Instagram, and I have never responded to a single one of them where they all say the same thing. Would you like to learn how to get more leads? Let's hop on a call and I can show you how my proven process, blah, 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 right? I don't even read the rest. No thanks. Delete. Don't be that person. Don't jump immediately into the invite to hop on the phone. You do want to have a bit of rapport building and getting to know them first. All right. The second thing that you don't want to do is that you don't want to be someone that you're not. So I feel like this one, when I say it to you, you're going to think obviously, right? Of course I'm going to be myself. But so many times that just isn't true. The way that you respond might be very different than how you would actually talk to a person in real life. You, out of all of the best of intentions, may wind up overthinking what you're going to say, or you just aren't great at conveying yourself when you're typing things out. And a conversation via DM may wind up feeling really stuffy or overly professional or formal or pushy or unfeeling, right? And all of those things are the nuance of needing to learn how to respond in DMs. And I also know that most of you have this fear of being too salesy because someone has probably done that to you at one point or another. And so you come off maybe a little bit awkward or disconnected. And all of these things can be a really big turnoff to someone that was attracted to you because your messaging, maybe that they saw somewhere else, really resonated or connected them to you. But then when they get into your DMs, they might feel like you come across as an entirely different personality. So just be really careful with this. Read what you've written. Ask yourself, does this sound like I'm talking to someone in real life? Is this how I would converse with them? Is this where the conversation would go? Am I jumping too quick to inviting them? Or do I sound like a robot here or too stuffy, right? So that is usually what I see a lot of times. People think I need to be professional, and then they sort of overdo it and come across as too professional or like it's their system, rather than just interacting with the person in DMs like a real person. Okay. Number 3, the third thing you don't want to do in your DMs is start coaching someone or offering solutions. Now, this is a big one. I hear this from a lot of coaches where they start an interaction and someone shares a problem with them. And because they don't quite know how to respond, they start like giving suggestions or asking questions about, have you tried this or have you tried that? And suddenly the conversation is like spiraling into a coaching conversation via DM, which just really is not effective. You don't have enough information to effectively answer that conversation. You're getting bits and pieces, fragments of a conversation. Like I mentioned before, it's not the same as a real world conversation. And it's really hard to recover the conversation once you've started coaching them in DMs. You're sort of setting an expectation that that's something that you do. And it just doesn't usually work very well at all. So make sure that you do not go down that path of coaching in your DMs. All right, the fourth thing, you don't want to keep the conversation going on and on and on and on. All right, you actually want to get it offline. You don't want to be asking a lot of questions. You don't want to be, taking it down the whole conversation path, right? Because it fizzles out. The energy sort of dies when you start asking, tell me what you've done with blah, blah, blah. Have you ever thought about XYZ? The person, the more back and forth that they're getting is getting more and more disengaged with that conversation in most cases, right? They're starting to fall off. They're like, I don't really know you well enough to know if I want to share all this information yet. And it tends to peter out. So don't keep the conversation going for too long. What you really want to do is get them on a phone call, right? Get them out of DMs and into the real world where you can talk about all of those details in a true conversation. So let's talk about how you can do that with the 6 things that you do want to do in your DMs. Okay, so we just did the 4 things you do not want to do. As a recap, you do not want to jump immediately into inviting them onto a phone call. You want to get to know them a little bit first. You don't want to show up as someone that you're not. Don't be too stuffy. Don't be too businessy. You want to be a real person. You don't want to start coaching them or offering them advice, and you don't want that conversation to keep going on and on and on and on, right? We want to get it into the real world. So here's the 6 things that you do want to do in your DMs. Number 1, the first thing that you want to do is connect with the person, okay? Pay attention to what they are saying. And when I say this, I mean read between the lines, because like I talked about before, we all sort of shorthand things when we are messaging people via DMs. So you do have to take a little bit more time to read between the lines. You want to connect with them and validate them. So reading between the lines means that you're going to stop and think about what they've shared with you before you respond, right? What words are they using? What did it take for them emotionally to share with you what they just shared? I want you to really think about that before you go and respond. So an example of that, this is an actual conversation that we saw from a coach that had shared this in the Client Creator Challenge. So the coach was responding to someone who had just joined her group, and she said, "I'm so glad you're in. I'm excited to have you. What's the first goal or task that you're looking to tackle?" And this prospect in her DM said, "Getting spending under control." And the coach said, "Have you ever tried anything before to help? If so, what?" And the client says, "Not really. What I've done is gotten angry with myself enough that I don't spend. Then I do well, and afterwards I end up falling off track and going on a spending frenzy." Okay, so stop here. Right here, I want you to think about what this client just said. They said what they've done is gotten angry at themselves enough so that they don't spend. Then they do well, but then they end up on a spending frenzy. So what do you think it took for a person to share this, right? They've just connected with you. They've just sort of joined up. And I want you to think about what it takes for someone to share this piece of themselves with you in a conversation. What emotions do you think are tied up in this admission? I want you to think about that before you respond in your DMs. This is how you're going to validate the client. You're going to acknowledge how they must be feeling, right? This is how you're going to build connection and let them know that you see them, that you understand them, that you get it. You're going to be paying attention to the message beneath the message, right? So this is really so important. And I think this is what allows you to move that conversation to the real world is by taking this time on the front end to acknowledge. So I always am looking for any words of emotion that I see someone sharing. That lets me know that they are opening up, that they're being vulnerable. People don't share things like that they beat themselves up, that they're angry at themselves. They, those types of things, that they always get in a fight, that they're stressed and overwhelmed. Like, those types of emotions are a vulnerable thing for a person to share. And so it tells me that this is really important to them, that they've opened up about it. So I'm looking for the emotions. I'm looking to see what are the words that they're sharing with me. I'm finding that place that they're trying to open up and be vulnerable. And that's what I want to acknowledge, right? So in your response, you want to acknowledge that. So in this example that I read, the client said, "I get angry with myself." So they also said they restrict themselves for a period of time, and then they go on a spending frenzy. So all of these things tell me that this client is really beating herself up with how she manages her money. It tells me that she keeps punishing herself, and it tells me that she feels very out of control with her money, right? She says she goes on a frenzy, right? She feels out of control. So take time to think about that before you respond, because when I read this, my initial thought is like, wow, what a horrible way to feel about your money, right? And that is what the client just shared with you, that they are feeling horrible about their money, that they're feeling out of control, that they're feeling badly about themselves, that they feel like they deserve to be punished. Now, this example that was shared was about a conversation that had gone wrong. It didn't move forward. After a couple of more exchanges, the coach shared that this, client just sort of fizzled away. They were really stumped and frustrated. They didn't understand why the conversation didn't move forward. And after we reviewed a few exchanges, it was really clear that this step of validating the client didn't happen. And it is so important, you guys, so important. This coach, in an extremely well-meaning way, jumped too quickly to offering solutions or trying to help this client. She had asked, "Have you ever considered routinely putting money aside for spending?" Right? She was trying to help, but because she hadn't first validated what was going on with the client, it could have been taken the wrong way, right? The client could have been thinking, well, she doesn't think I'm very smart, or she's putting me down, or any other number of things. They were already having drama in their mind to be sharing what they were, and this might have, pushed them over the edge. So this very well-meaning response took this conversation offline. Like, it just killed it. It didn't go any further. There was no more engagement. It really missed that important step of creating connection with this client. And that's what I mean when I say you need to read between the lines. You're looking for the emotions that the client is expressing, and then you're going to take time to validate to the client and let them know that they are seen and heard. So an alternate response could have been something like, I'm so sorry you've been experiencing that. I know how frustrating it can be to find yourself stuck in that cycle of restricting so hard and then eventually falling off the wagon because it's just too hard to keep going. That must feel so awful to keep getting angry with yourself about your spending, right? I'm not offering any solutions here. I'm not coaching here. I'm not inviting her to get on a call here. What I'm doing is validating her feelings. I've read between the lines. I've acknowledged the stress that she's feeling, and I want to speak that back to her. I want her to know that I see her, right? So that is the first thing that you want to do. Number 2, I sort of talked about this as a thing you don't want to do, but you want to be yourself and you don't want to be a weirdo, right? So number 2 is that you want to sound like you. Do you sound like a real person? Do you sound like a robot or AI or too formal? So before you hit send on your DM, really check your response. Make sure that you sound like you and that you sound like you actually would if you were talking to someone. And be confident in the way that you are responding. Okay, so be yourself, be confident, sound like you, don't sound like a robot or AI. Okay, number 3, what you do want to do is get the conversation offline and into a real life conversation as quickly as is reasonable and natural. So I'm adding that last part because it's not just an immediate get them onto the phone. You want to do it as quickly as is reasonable and natural. So remember, you're not going to jump to this immediately. First, you want to build some rapport. You want to connect with them first. You want to validate their feelings, right? But then you do want to invite them to connect offline without dragging that conversation on. So inviting them in a weird way or in a too formal way, or like jumping to it too quickly, might sound something like this. This is how not to do it, okay? I want to be clear. The first thing I'm going to give you is how you don't want to do it, is you might jump in with something like, is this something you would be open to working through together? If you're even a bit curious about what that might look like, we can schedule some time to chat. It would be a free 20-minute Q&A phone call where I learn more about what you're looking to accomplish and you ask me questions about how I help my clients reach their money goals. What do you think about this? Okay, this is way too much about you, coach, and it's not enough about them. All right. So why would they want this? What is in it for them? How does it help them? This sounds too much like it's a call for you to get a client, not a call for them to be heard and get some help. So I want you to always run things through this filter. Is this response about me getting them on the call, or is this response about them getting help they need? Okay, those are two very different ways to respond. So let's try this again. Let's try this in a better approach to ask them to take it offline. Okay, here is what you could say. I often find that there are many different things that could be contributing to someone feeling a little out of control with their spending. And a lot of times it's a combination of a couple of factors that keep contributing to this cycle. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you've been experiencing and see if I can give any insights about what I see that might be a factor or factors, and that you could focus on as first steps to help make improvements. I find that it's much easier to talk about this if we actually connect in real life and hop on the phone. I have some time open tomorrow. Would you be free at 3 to connect? Right? So again, it's an invitation and you're telling them why you are connecting, not it's a free 20-minute Q&A call, because that is like too much about your process. They don't care about your process here. You're inviting them to have a conversation about something that feels vulnerable to them. So make sure that you are truly inviting them and you're telling them why it's going to help them, what is going to be offered on this phone call that's good for them. So in the second one, remember, I talked about that we could be we're going to talk about the various factors that might be influencing how she's feeling. And I am going to try to point to one or two things that she can do now to start moving things forward, right? And then I'm making it very easy, saying, what does your day look like tomorrow? I have some free time at X time, right? So again, we're just inviting, it's like a normal conversation. It doesn't have to be too formal sounding. So that is really what you want to do when you are inviting them offline and into the real world. All right. So some other things that you can do when you are on DMs and having these conversations with people is that you can actually ask them if they are ready for coaching, just depending on how that conversation is going. So sometimes this is appropriate, sometimes this is not, but based on the conversation, sometimes this does help to lead into a phone call. If they're asking you a question about something, you might respond back and say, I'm curious, are you asking about this for yourself? Or are you asking for someone else? You might say, is this something that you're hoping to find some help with? Or is this something that you feel ready to tackle? Any of those things can help move the conversation forward without you going into coaching or going into an endless back and forth of conversation that goes nowhere. So you asking directly, is this something that you're asking about for yourself? Or are you looking for a solution for this? Is this something you feel ready to tackle? All of that sort of opens the door to saying, I would love to learn more about what's going on with you. It's usually easiest for me to do that through a real conversation. I have time open on Thursday. What does your day look like? Right? So again, these are sometimes some statements or questions that you can use to help guide the conversation towards that invitation to get on a phone call. Number 5, this is something that you can do in DMs still as you're getting ready to invite them onto a call, is you want to own that you can help them. You want to be confident about it. So you want to let them know, I absolutely can help with that. If it is something that you feel like you can help with, or you could say, I would love to help you solve that. Or I have no doubt that I can help make that feel so much better, or that I can help come up with a plan for that, right? Of course, only if all of these things are true. But if they're sharing with you that they're having problems with getting out of debt, or that they really want to save for their first house, or that they're, preparing for their child to go off to college and they're stressed about the added expenses that are coming, as long as whatever they're sharing with you is something you feel very confident you can help with, own it. Share that with them. Say, this is exactly the sort of thing I help people with. I would love to help you with this. And then it's very easy to invite them onto a phone call because, again, they're building trust that you can help solve the problem they have. All right. The last thing that you do want to do in your DMs is to be very clear about the next step for them to take. So you don't want to leave it sort of open-ended or ambiguous where they don't know what that next step is. Your ultimate goal is to get that DM conversation to move from the online conversation to a real world conversation. So you need to be clear about directing them about whatever that looks like in your client journey. So maybe your step for most people is to do that Q&A call. So you would say, hey, let's hop on the phone. You don't need to tell them, I offer a free 20-minute Q&A call and you can schedule it by clicking this link. You can do it in a much more authentic or natural sort of way by saying, I've got an opening on Thursday. Let's hop on the phone and I can learn a bit more about what you have going on, right? So it sounds less intimidating. It sounds more inviting, and that's really what you want. You don't want to suddenly go from a conversation to something that sounds super formal and rigid and scary for someone, okay? Or if your process, like us at Fiscal Fitness, our process is that everyone just goes onto our wait list. And so that is where I'm directing people in DMs. So I might tell them all of these things I did before. I might validate their feelings. That's so frustrating. I'm so sorry you feel like that. It can be really hard. There's a number of things that might be contributing to that. Those are the exact types of things that I help people with. I would love to help you with this. And your next step would be to grab a spot on our wait list. I'm going to have a couple spots opening up soon, and I absolutely know that I can help you to solve this, but you'll need to be on the wait list to get notified of when my spots are open. And then I can give them the link to the wait list, right? So whatever that next step is for you, direct them to it. Be very clear about what that next step is for them to take, so that it is smooth and you don't feel like it got lost in communication. All right, so hopefully this helps you to see how to be a bit more effective in your conversations with people in your DMs. Just to recap the things that you do want to do, you want to connect with them, right? Pay attention to what they're saying, read between the lines and look for those emotions so that you can validate what they've shared with you. You want to be yourself. You don't want to be a weirdo. Just be you, be natural, sound like you would when you're in a conversation with a real person. You want to get that conversation offline and into the real world as quickly as is reasonable and natural, right? So you might want to ask them if they're ready for coaching. You want to own that you can help them, and you want to be clear about what the next step is that they need to take. All right. In our next episode, I'm going to dive into how to talk about investing as a financial coach. Oh boy, we get this one all the time. We see this question pop up in the Facebook group. We know that you guys want to know, how do you talk about investing as a coach, and how do you do it without crossing the line into advising? What does that look like? Don't worry. Next week, I've got you covered. So make sure you come back for that one. And before we go, let's close things up with your reflection question of the week. As you know, we are coaches, and as coaches, we want to be practicing the coaching philosophy, which means that we want you thinking about what you've learned and how this might impact how you feel or the actions that you take. So we want you to deepen your awareness about this topic by spending a little bit of time reflecting on your thoughts to gain some clarity on today's topic. All right. This also creates an opportunity for you to share with us, and we do love to hear from you that have listened to the podcast. So if you've been listening along and you're on YouTube, drop a comment. I read and respond to all of them. So please make sure that you are leaving a comment. I would love to hear what you think of today's episode. Or you can drop a comment in our Facebook group, Financial Coaches Unite. If you're not already a member, make sure you pop over to Facebook and request to join Financial Coaches Unite, where we've got a community of over 8,000 coaches all hanging out and learning and growing together. We would love to hear your thoughts there. All right. So your question for today is, I want you to think about the conversations that you have had in your DMs with potential leads or prospects. And I want you to think about how that conversation went. When you reflect back on it, did you follow the do's or don'ts that I outlined here? Which ones can you identify? How did you do? And let me know. All right, guys, that is it for today's episode. You know that at the Financial Coach Academy, we truly do believe that financial coaching is the best and most rewarding way to make a living. I truly love what I do. I hope that you do too. If you're ready to learn and see how to become a profitable and successful financial coach, check us out at financialcoachacademy.com to learn more about our online courses, free trainings, and events. And as always, we love hearing from you. So if you have questions for the FCA podcast or just want to share any of your thoughts from the reflection question today, you can either do that, as I mentioned, in the Facebook group or on our YouTube channel, or you can drop us a line by going to financialcoachacademy.com/podcast. And if you love this podcast, please hit the thumbs up sign. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. It really helps the podcast a lot and allows us to get the word out to others who want some help with their own financial coaching business. So that is it for today, guys. I will see you in a week.